So thanks for joining me, Kate. We've had a bit of a chat about this and the idea of bouncing forward. So it's sort of cultivating the ability to learn from the experience so we can adapt and possibly transform as we go forward. What do you think about the experience that you've had from COVID? Are there things that you want to keep as we bounce forward into what's going to be an increasingly uncertain time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there have to be if you've gone through something like this and haven't had any insight around what you might change as a result, then I think you've had a different experience to the majority of us. But overwhelmingly, I think we've got the opportunity to redesign the world in a way that we want to. And so for me, the reflections have really been on three levels. Firstly, I suppose the one around myself and my role in the world. Secondly, around myself and my interactions with my close others, so family, colleagues, community, and then reflections, I guess, at the more systems level. So thinking about, what needs to change globally and nationally. So perhaps if I could reflect on those three levels briefly.
That would be great.
So for myself, I think the overwhelming reflection has been the opportunity to slow down, to be grateful for the things that we hold dear to our hearts, the opportunity for us to all think about how we use resources more sustainably, given that we can't get to the shops and shop the way we used to, the opportunity to be more intentional, and obviously the reflection that many of us have had about the importance of human connection, although we're connecting differently. For me personally, it's been an opportunity to change my mindset from being very busy and output driven, where as a bit of context, I live 45 minutes from town on a 300-acre bush regen block. So getting out the gates every day is busy, getting the kids to school is busy, working and then doing it that 5 days a week. So my pace of life was faster. And I realized that I was actually exhausted. I feel quite refreshed, tired in a different way, but refreshed by not having to upkeep that pace. So rest and recover after, such a hectic start to the year. But also on the flip side of that, it's been a very intense time for deep reflection and thinking, particularly coming out of the bushfires. And a lot of us, I think, have experienced this deep emotional, ecological grief around what the world is right now and what the world is moving towards, particularly with regards to climate change. So as we contemplate about the future, I think for me as well, it's been an opportunity to really think about my purpose and what brings me joy and meaning, and energy. And I guess it's really been an opportunity to reconfirm that what we're doing and how we're raising our children on this bush block is the way to do it, to live our life with climate change as the primary lens, to guide our behaviours, has been reaffirming. And really coming back to the core of why we are living and raising our children like this. I think one of the challenges coming out of it, though, and bouncing forward, is around thinking about how we balance what we know and love about this time with that continued need to operate in a capitalist democracy. We still need to earn money. We still need, to try and balance those competing interests. So that will be a really interesting thing to navigate for many of us as we perhaps redefine what's important to us, yet at the same time we've still got the modern necessities of mortgages and cars and all of the things that modern life, I guess, throws our way. And I suppose moving on to thinking about our connection with others, then I think this has been a really interesting situation to connect with others in our closer circles, at the community level. But what that means also is that we've spent so much more time on screens. That's a good and bad thing, right? We know that we're not alone in this traverse through the grief cycle of lockdown. So we're connected by that common experience with each other. And we've found common joys and common challenges out of that. But I think particularly, and I shouldn't say but, and we're fortunate that many of us can homeschool our children. However, that has been particularly challenging for those working as well. And the more our kids are connected online, that just gives rise to so many additional problems. And that's certainly a huge concern that I have for my children, looking in terms of what might change as a result. And I think as organisations and institutions realise the potential of their workforce to work remotely, I think equal cadence needs to be given to considering mental and physical health as people don't travel to work, don't connect with community as much. There's a flip side to every coin, and I think we really need to be cognizant of that. And I suppose thirdly, at the systems level, we are in this epoch-defining moment where many are saying COVID-19 is the precursor to runaway climate change. And I have experienced the lockdown as a very privileged, white, middle-class female. And as I sit on the board of WaterAid Australia, where we do water and sanitation and hygiene programs in developing countries, to see that play out in those countries is a very different experience and context from ours. And the nexus or the intersection between climate change and COVID in these countries is very clear. So as we think about bouncing forward and becoming resilient around that, the big question for me is, what is the point of difference between the decisions that have been made, particularly in Australia, around the health and the response, the health impacts and the response that we've had in Australia? What's the gap between climate change? How are we influencing our decision makers with science on the health side of it, and we're not influencing on the climate side of it? And is it an equality issue? Because certainly COVID affects everyone. There's no economic boundary there. It kills everyone, or can do. But climate change affects the world's poor. So we really have some interesting thoughts and opportunities arising. And what I am really keen to see is how that translates into action. So they're, I guess, the kind of 3 levels of my thinking.
Wow, I would love to have your brain occasionally because that was really insightful. I really enjoyed listening through those and sort of considering myself where I was sitting in relation to them. And certainly I relate in all 3 spheres and resonate very strongly with the privilege that we've had. But yes, I certainly find the response that we've had, because we've felt an immediate impact to our health, and the listening to science in sharp contrast to what we've been trying to do for so long with climate change. So I guess maybe it's an opportunity to really analyse what it was. Is it just the what about me? I'm really, really worried about me, which is why we all comply. Or what other settings were there that actually enabled it to feel so real to people?
And I think that's that's critical, is what has made it real to people. And for me, it always comes back to people's values. That's what drives our behaviours, and that's what motivates us to behave. And so if we can connect with people's value sets, value systems, we have this opportunity to redefine the future. If we're talking about connection, human connection and collaboration as the opportunity to take hold of, then how do we do that in the space of climate change? How do we translate that across from COVID into climate change? How do we get from, a system of hatred and war and competition to one that we're talking about, which is coming from a place of love and humanity and abundance? this is the time and the opportunity to, I guess, reorganize ourselves from places inside of us that are generative as opposed to destructive, generative and intentional from a place of love and grace, generative in terms of the way we think about having different kinds of conversations with different people who might think slightly differently to us in order to generate those alternative futures. Because if we don't take that opportunity to regenerate from a place of really beautiful, generous, kind, collaborative intention, then I think we all need to be really concerned, and I really hope that we can translate the words into action. So I think that's going to be the piece, the telling piece, is when we see action, not only from policy and decision makers, but we'll see that, we already have seen that at the community level. So we need to see that generative, intentional decision making come out, which is there for all of humanity, like the response to COVID has been, to consider all of humanity in the climate change space.
Thank you so much. That's great. And I think that's a future topic for a longer episode. So watch this space. I'll be back in touch soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Sure.